Hello, and welcome to the Game Dev Garden, a podcast all about deep conversations, game development curiosities, mental health, and wherever the dialogue might take us. Thank you so much for joining me here today, and I'd like to welcome today's guest. Lewis Barn is a fantastic sound designer at PlayStation and an equally fantastic friend of mine. Welcome to the show, Lewis.
Hello, thank you for having me. It's pretty exciting to be here.
No trouble at all. Thanks again for joining us. So, why this podcast before we get started? I love podcasts, from the Level Design Lobby to the Devolver Forecast and the Game Maker's Notebook. And games are all about perspectives, and I would really like to add my own and that of the people that mean a lot to me and who have inspired me. So, I just want to share those conversations and stories that our industry is fundamentally full of. So I would also like to thank Chloe Kwok for the wonderful intro, and I have no doubt
Hey,
that she will be making an appearance on the show somewhere down the line. So Lewis, how are you doing today? Welcome again.
thank you. Yeah, I'm doing pretty good, thanks. We're just about to wind down for Christmas, so I'm like, yeah,
Mhm.
I'm feeling good, feeling festive.
Oh, lovely. Are you playing anything at the moment? Are you playing any games?
Yes, so I actually just started on the weekend, Death Stranding. I was a little bit late to it, but
No.
better late than never. And uh, so far, I'm not gonna speak too soon, but I really like it. It's definitely got its hooks in me.
Oh
Uh,
gosh, I'm so glad. I'm so glad you're enjoying it. It's a favorite of mine. So brilliant. What are you thinking of the traversal mechanics?
I like that it feels like a thing in of itself. Like it's got like depth to it, and it feels quite meditative. Like you're just kind of strolling
Yeah.
along. And when I got the bike, I actually didn't want to use it because
Mm,
it wasn't as fun as just like plodding
mm,
along. So,
mm.
so yeah, I rate it, and I'm excited to see like how it develops and stuff. Like the heavier things get,
Yeah,
and
yeah. I really appreciate the sort of meditative side of that game as well. You know, the score and the way it builds up to these like beautiful vistas, and
yeah,
and you
yeah.
gradually come to understand the landscapes more and more. I think that's incredibly powerful and also incredibly unique.
Yeah, definitely, and the ambiances as well. Like
Mm.
the I was walking through some woods, and just like it just felt so good. Like the trees creaking and the rain like subtly changing through the trees and the wind. Oh, it's just very very good.
No, that's brilliant. I think that the fact that you pick out those elements of Death Stranding is equally curious, because the sort of things that stood out to me with Death Stranding were the holistic game design, and also the amazing sort of drip feeding of mechanics as you go. Like as soon as you're sort of feeling like you're ready for the next mechanic, bang, there you go. It sort of gives you the next piece of the puzzle,
Yeah,
which I
definitely.
really liked. But yes, so Lewis, would you like to tell us a little bit about your story and sort of the road that you took to becoming a sound designer at PlayStation?
So I guess how far back do you want to go? um,
Um, no, let's start wherever you feel is appropriate, mate.
Sure. Well, my original plan, like, is quite common in sound, as a sound designer, to have this sort of path. But it was going into music, and I did a music production undergrad degree, and I was, in several bands in high school and things like that. That was what I wanted to do, and then I did a game audio module, and like my eyes were open to how awesome game audio is essentially. And I loved that it was a really nice crossover between uh, tech and creativity. And that's where I found like my interest lied. And yeah, so I just kind of, everything clicked, and I knew this is what I kind of wanted to do. And so, yeah, after piquing my interest, I just sort of dove headfirst in,
Yeah.
took a year out and really focused on, you know, teaching myself everything I could. And then I made the decision to start a master's in game audio. So, um, you know,
Mhm.
I didn't. it wasn't necessary, but I wanted to put myself in that environment and collaborate with people. And you can spend half an hour googling how to do something, or you can just tap someone on the shoulder in the library and get the answer. And I think it's just a much more fulfilling, like, kind of, I don't know. I love people and stuff, so it's
Mhm.
I wanted that side of it.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think you can get a huge amount out of courses, especially even if you can learn it all independently, and even if they're very independently learning driven, you can still get a tremendous amount from those courses because the nuance of someone explaining something to you and being able to have a dialogue and a back and forth is very important.
Absolutely, definitely, yeah.
And
Um,
it's really nice hearing that like this sort of generalist course path worked for you because I think a lot of people find themselves on very generalist courses, and by experiencing all aspects like holistically of game development, it sort of helps them sort of absolutely know for sure, am I on the right path?
yeah, for sure. And I mean, I think I owe a lot of that to the networking events that I went to before starting the course, because I went to Leeds Games Toast, and just asking around about the industry, and, like,
Mhm,
from all different backgrounds and things like that, and seeing just how nice it was. Like, everyone actually kind of was, rooting for each other, and there was this nice sense of community that didn't feel false.
mhm,
I loved that, and it seems to be consistent, like, wherever you go in games,
mhm.
um, which
Yeah.
is a huge factor for me.
Same, exactly same here. Like the networking scene for me has been hugely influential in my career, both professionally and honestly personally. A lot of my best friends I've met at networking events, and the people who I can have deep, intimate conversations with that help me with the direction that I need to take. So hearing that you got the same out of networking events is fantastic because the thing that people can sometimes forget is networking events aren't always about securing a big opportunity. They're about the personal side of things as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you need to really go with that as your first intention, to meet
Hmm.
people and to make friends, because if you go just wanting the opportunities, I think people can really see that, and it
It's
kind
obvious,
of,
yeah.
yeah, it just really taints the experience, I think.
Mhm. Totally. And then another thing you mentioned was the sort of combination of technical skills and creativity. That is true and true. One of the reasons that I love game development, and a project where you get to solve technical problems to solve a creative problem. That's the magic for me. And obviously, same for you.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Um, and I got a lot of experience on that through the couple of game jams that we did, actually, which was good
Oh
fun.
yeah. Oh my gosh. Yeah, we've done a few now. Yeah, and those game jams, they let you express yourself and come out with something complete at the end of it, and you also get to sort of understand the other side of the coin a bit better if you maybe are trapped in your own level design bubble or your code bubble or your sort of audio bubble. You can sort of work very closely with someone and really understand the nuts and bolts of the other disciplines.
Yeah, absolutely. It's like a crash course in games, isn't it? It's
Yeah,
such a
no, for sure.
condensed uh, little, like, sprint of seeing everything and how it all comes together. Is
Mhm.
Yeah, I recommend everyone does that kind of thing.
Yeah, no, big recommendation from me as well. It's one of those almost sort of cliches you hear, but like you should be doing game jams because it shows your passion and it proves your skills, and it really sort of lets you put yourself out there and put yourself on the page rather than thinking about all these fantastic games that you'd like to make. It's like go time. It's like, right, let's go. Let's actually make this.
Absolutely. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So that sort of brings me on to my next question. What is it about sound design that's really special to you? Like what
Ooh.
what what is it that made you pursue sound design instead of composition or maybe like a different discipline like game design? What is it about the sound design aspects that really draws you in?
Um, it sounds like a cliche, like, but it's such a big part of the experience, and it's often overlooked. It you can tell stories with it. You can assist the player in like small ways, and
Hmm.
as we've seen in like bigger cases, like it can help drive like people were playing The Last of Us who were blind, and
Hmm.
like that level of accessibility is like massively driven through sound, and so there's that side of it. But then there's also just uh, the potential to you know create original, exciting content, and yeah, like tell a story through it. So
Hmm.
it might just be a door opening, but you can give incredible context through the way it creaks and small little details like that. And yeah, for me, it was like growing up with, it's again another cliche, but yeah, it's true. Like growing up with Star Wars, and I remember one of the big kind of light bulb moments was my parents were watching Star Wars in the other room, and I could hear the TIE fighter through the wall, and I was like, man, that like that's so iconic, and it's it comes with so many memories and associations, and yeah, if I could contribute that to something, then that'll be, yeah, that's what I want to do, and that's fulfilling to me.
Wow, that's lovely. Yeah, yeah. The detail aspect of it, so sort of accentuating the game, is something that I've experienced firsthand from working with you. Like the way that you can sell interaction and collision, even everything from just simple collisions can be a meaningful gameplay moment thanks to the sound design and the accessibility side of things as well. It's essential. It's gonna in the coming years.
Yeah,
It's going to become almost as big a part of the game as the core mechanics and the tutorials. We are going to see accessibility become more and more essential in games, and I think an enormous part of that is going to be driven by the sound design.
I think so, and I think it's like where there's a joke that audio is always forgotten, but it's the classic thing of if you watch a horror film without the sound, it's not scary. Like it's such a big part of the experience, and um, the joke's kind of there for a reason. Like people don't always think of it, but when you notice it's gone, it's gone.
Oh yeah.
Um, and there was another parallel, which was if you're watching a really bad rip of a video or something, and the picture's bad, then you might stick it out. But if the audio is bad, most people will stop because they just can't. You need to be able to hear it.
Absolutely. It's one of those things where it's you don't notice it's gone until it's gone, like you said. Like it's the same for like a really good tutorial. If a good tutorial is missing, or if it's a bad tutorial, you will notice it like a sore thumb. However,
Uh-huh.
if it's well done and it's paced correctly, you won't even see the difference. Which is super super cool. And then like the storytelling side of things that you mentioned as well. Um, you know Game design and audio design can go hand in hand in these cases. There's a moment in the first Last of Us game actually where Joel goes to boost Ellie up onto sort of a higher platform, and you've done this multiple times throughout the game, and you come to this moment and you trigger the event and it just doesn't happen. Ellie just
Yeah,
sort of doesn't show up. She's sitting at the bench, and it's a really powerful storytelling moment that's told through the game design. And the same can be said of sound design. People can do that sort of work with fantastic, elegant sound design as well.
absolutely, and it plays on that repetition. Like the reason it sticks out so much is because you're used to her just
Yeah.
responding to your button press, and
Mhm.
so yeah, like sounds are often one of the big things, one of the big considerations you have to make is to they have to be able to withstand repetition, and you can play on that and use it to your advantage as well.
Mhm. Yeah, repetition is a really interesting one. Actually, that's a super curious point because fundamentally you are going to hear certain sound effects over and over and over again. And you don't want them to grate on you, but you also need them to highlight the gameplay events, don't you?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a super curious one, and I hadn't considered that so much myself. Um, so the next question I had for you, Lewis, was if you had the opportunity to sort of go back to, your sort of early days when you were beginning your journey as a sound designer, what would you tell yourself? What piece of advice would you give?
Oh, I think there's so much I could say. There's so much that I've learned since I've started that would help me out. But if I really had to boil it down, it would be depending on what you're doing, obviously. But think of the player always. That's what you know. That is what you're doing. It's a game at the end of the day, and you shouldn't be. I think that some designers have a tendency to design for other designers, and be
Mm,
really technically impressive and things. But if
yeah,
it's at the end of the day, if it doesn't cater for the player, then like it's not achieved its goal. So I think that's a really important one. But also in terms of the actual designing itself, to try and keep things really clean, I think it's really easy to overcomplicate things. And just keep adding layers and layers
yeah,
of sound. But if you take the opposite approach and strip it away, you'll find that actually you don't need quite a lot of the fluff. And if it's a cleaner sound, I think it's a lot more effective and memorable.
yeah. Wow, that's amazing. That is. It's interesting because so much of those lessons that you gave, you could give those to a game designer. You could give those to an artist. You
Yeah,
know,
there's a lot of cross. Like
yeah, yeah,
you can learn, we can all learn so much from each other. And I think that's why
yeah.
um, that's like the beauty of games, isn't it? It's like,
Oh yeah,
and
yeah.
I guess I don't know what you would think, but from my experience, people tend to stick to their kind of their field, and I think if you step outside and learn from the others around you, I think it would be really beneficial.
I wholeheartedly agree with that because some of the biggest design lessons I have are not strictly game design lessons. The famous game feel talks. If they always give this one takeaway talk. Sorry, this one piece of takeaway advice. It's basically if you're going to add one, it's a single element of game feel. If you were to add one element and ignore everything else, it's the audio. You add the audio. That is your number one priority because you will get the most bang for your buck. And that's just like that's not a game design lesson fundamentally. It's
Uh,
it's linked with game design, but it's literally a sound design lesson. And I think that example is interesting as well because you are a sound designer and um, having our friendship and our connection and understanding what is important from a sound designer to game design is hugely important. And like coming out of your discipline to learn from a coder or an artist or a technical person, you'll actually grow so much faster and with so much more depth as well. So I couldn't, yeah,
100%.
absolutely.
And on top of that as well, like a common question for people starting out is, oh, like, do I need to know code, and is that really important? And you know, obviously, if you're going for something really technical, then it's a different answer. But for like me, for example, it's not essential for what we do, but it goes such a long way, even if it's just for the sake of the conversation you're having with a programmer,
Yeah,
um, just to understand each other's languages, and equally, like vice versa. If it's the programmer and they understand a little bit about audio, that goes a long way as well. And yeah, it just comes back to what we were saying. You
mhm.
got to talk to each other and learn from each other.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a video game as a whole. When you're making a project and you're on a project, it's not necessarily no one's thinking is the design fantastic, is the art fantastic alone. They're looking at the game as a whole. We've talked about The Last of Us today as well, and I think the beauty of the design in The Last of Us is how every single element of that game pushes in the same direction. You know, and it's not immediately obvious that's why it's a special game, but it takes like some reflection to sort of see that sometimes.
I completely agree. I think the big strength of it is how how just high the bar is across the board,
Mm. Oh yeah,
and it just shows. Yeah, it is really impressive. Yeah.
very much so. Um, moving on to sort of our second little section of the podcast, which is what I like to call the game development curiosities. So,
Ooh.
in sound design, would you talk a little bit about some aspects of sound design for someone who isn't a sound designer? What is the most curious part of the job that they might not initially understand that you, as a seasoned professional, could shine some light on?
That's a good question. I so something that I wouldn't have immediately known, or someone wouldn't immediately know, of something that I do day to day.
Mhm.
Okay. I think maybe it would be something small like repetition. So you
Yeah.
can spend a long time designing a sound and crafting it, making sure it's it fits well. But then you have to consider the variations of it and design, play around with different things to make sure that it's you're not just going to hear the same sound every time and that it's not varying too much. I guess that's something that like is off overlooked. For example, every time you put a gun on your back or in a backpack, like it's
Mhm.
not the same sound every time. There's like loads of layers that are varying in different ways, which change things and stop listener fatigue essentially.
Mhm.
But
So, a question I had about that then would be: so when you're creating a sound that you know is going to be heard multiple times, and is probably going to have limited variation, what is it that stops that sound from becoming repetitive? Is there a process involved that someone who isn't a sound designer might not know about, or is it just testing?
well, I think that so there's like a saying that the more often you hear something, the smaller it needs to be. So if you're scrolling through a menu, it needs to be as very subtle. And taking that example, if that was a really tonal design, it might get annoying because uh, it's a constant tone. So avoiding tonal stuff could be good, but equally, there's the other side to that coin, which is if you do it right, it could give it like a sense of musicality, which could be nice. So I think it really depends on the context.
Mhm. Wow. Yeah, no, that's awesome. Like I'd never considered that at all. I love this. This is kind of sort of hitting home in terms of the reason I wanted to do the show, because um, these sort of little nuggets of knowledge, these little gems, sort of shine a better light on the work that I do, and the perspectives are really valuable. Um, my next question would be, if you had to give a perfect example of sound design, what would it be? Would you maybe lean on that Star Wars example that you gave earlier, or is there something else that comes to mind at all?
A perfect example of sound design. I think again, it could be depending on what you're going for. But in terms of just like purely aesthetics and sound, then um, yeah, I think. Well, in fact, recently with the latest Mandalorian episode, there were reaction videos for a sound. It was the seismic charge that was dropped, which was in one of the films, and people loved it. And then for a sound to have reaction videos is wild. Like that is just
Yeah,
unheard of. um, and it's I think the reason it's so iconic is it drops to absolute silence before it hits. And it's a cool sound in of itself, but the use of silence and the use of like negative space is just so smart when it's used properly, and that kind of thing can be used in explosions as well. Like, well, not quite as dramatic as that, but
yeah.
uh, having a transient and then a few milliseconds of silence between the initial hit and the rest of the impact really pulls your ear in um, and like plays with your expectation of what you're hearing. Uh, So
Wow,
I would
that's
say
awesome.
that's a great
Yeah,
example.
that's so powerful as well. Like, I know exactly what you're talking about. You know, the sort of layered elements and the use of minimalism, I suppose you could call it, like the abstraction of
Yeah,
sound in that example. You know, that's a technique that you can use as a designer. You know, big time. Wow, I love that. That's a fantastic answer. Um, as we move on to sort of our last sort of section of the show, um, Lewis, would you be comfortable talking a little bit about mental health on the show today?
absolutely. Would love to. I'm always up for talking about it. I think we need to talk about it more.
Fantastic. I do appreciate that because you know it's important to sort of ask the question because um, you know mental health can be a very personal subject and like you said it should be talked about more but you know on the individual's terms is equally important uh,
Definitely. Yeah.
but
Well,
yeah
thanks for asking.
you're no problem at all so sort of my first sort of question on this would be so what tactics do you have for when you're dealing with a bad day to you know to sort of get your job done and or just to you know push forwards and keep yourself above water? What tactics do you have to deal with that, mate?
Well, I think there's a few things. It's a big one is attention and like where your attention is going, and if you it's like something that has to be built up. But if you can sort of, it's like train it as like a muscle. Like attention could be trained like a muscle, and if you know uh, where your attention's going, it can just be such a strong. It could be such a help in making sure you're focused. There's this idea that you always have focused. It's not something you have to try for. And if you recognize when your attention's been taken off something, that alone, that small like noticing that small thing is enough to sort of bring you back to that state of focus. And it's something that's innate and always there. It's the
Yeah,
distractions that are the problem. So if I notice myself, being distracted a lot, then obviously try to take the distraction away. But in the cases where it's like maybe I got a busy head that day or something,
yeah,
I'll usually meditate or headspace or go for a walk, just something that um, just takes me out of it for 10 minutes, because I think taking that time out is ultimately much better for the rest of the time.
mm,
You'd just be so much more productive.
yeah.
Um, so that's what I would say. Yeah.
I love that. That's such a fantastic practical tip there. And like you said, I think everyone could benefit from taking a step back from their thoughts. Sometimes, you know, mindfulness is an essential part of that as well. And going for a walk and meditating are excellent examples of dealing with that. Um,
100%. I think
yeah.
as well, like, sorry,
No, no, go ahead, mate. Sorry.
that in regards to mindfulness and things, I think it's because it's such a big umbrella term for a lot of things. I think it's easy to sort of brush it off.
Yeah,
But for me, the big sort of driver for it was the science, like, and seeing like all the studies that there's such a strong correlation for how good it is. So I was like, okay, well, there's got to be something to it, and I think knowing that was such a big driver for me. So I always try to push that side of it as well. It's not like it's not just whimsical. It's
no, no,
there's substance to it.
it's not. It's fundamentally not a pseudoscience at all, is it? You know, and um, if anyone does see it that way, I can, you know, there's plenty of scientific evidence out there, like you said, Lewis. But you can also try it out for yourself, and it is you will see. I think you will see fantastic results from it.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And then sort of our final question would be, so like is there any aspect of mental health that you wish was talked about more, or um, was maybe better understood?
Um, that's a tough one, because I think that I'm quite lucky in terms of what I've had to deal with and that kind of thing. So um, I think that you know. Hmm, I think I wouldn't want to say anything in terms of like uh, what I've had to deal with and like that kind of thing. Like, because there are people out there that have, had it far worse than I have. But I think just stressing the importance of talking to your friends and how much of a difference that makes. And going further than that, it's all well and good saying that, but having friends who can help you recognize that you do need to chat as well, because sometimes you don't know it yourself. I think a lot can be said for that, and when you're feeling low, you don't really want to text someone to say, "Hey, I'm feeling low," because
No, there's such context that comes with that.
Exactly. So I think, if your friend notices that you're off or something like that, having the kind of confidence to and the understanding of how to approach it in like a sensitive way is I think something that everyone could do with.
Oh, totally. Yeah, mate. I couldn't. That's a fantastic way of describing that. And for me personally as well, I feel exactly what you're saying. I have there's a group of us guys, and we meet every week to play D&D. But we also have a moment in that where we all just say, "Yo, like, how is everyone? How is everyone been this week?" And like having that moment and that opportunity to be like, you know what, this week has really sucked. It's been really hard on me. I've been in a dark place, and we have this conversation about it, and we're able to recognize that, and we just wouldn't be able to do that over a message, like you said, mate.
Absolutely, that's really good that you got that there.
Yeah. No, it's sort of organically sort of came out of us meeting every week, and it's done wonders for me personally, and I know other members of the group. So yeah.
Nice. Yeah, having like that kind of I guess if it's D&D and it's a regular commitment, then it also doubles up as like having a regular chance to sort of speak out about stuff.
And with COVID and not being able to see people face to face, it's helped with some of the complications that's brought to dealing with mental health.
100%, yeah. And I think just to expand on it as well, that going back to what I was saying about attention, like actually listening, not just saying,
"Oh my gosh,
how are things," but really hearing the person out, and even if you don't necessarily have advice to give, you don't need to do that. It's just people want to be heard.
Yeah, that's spot on, and the ability to listen is something that we need in our jobs, but it's equally important for our friendships and relationships.
Definitely.
Yeah. Well, thank you ever so much for joining us today, Lewis. Would you like to plug your Twitter or anything, or say any closing thoughts at all?
Well, thanks for having me. It's been nice to talk. My Twitter is just @LewisBarn, just my name. I thought I'd keep it plain and simple. But no, thanks for having me on. And yeah, I really like the message behind it, and I think it's especially talking about mental health and putting a spotlight on different disciplines ties back to what we were talking about earlier. I think it's great to be on. So thanks.
You're welcome, Lewis. It's been my pleasure and privilege to have you here. And this episode is sort of captures everything that I'm trying to do with the show, and it's nice that you can see the sort of perspective that we're going for and what makes it special. So thanks again, mate, and all the best.
You too as well. Happy Christmas.
Yeah, happy Christmas. Gosh, yes, this is being recorded around the festive period. So hopefully not too many January blues when this goes live. But once again, thank you ever so much for joining me here today at the Game Dev Garden, a podcast all about deep conversations, game development curiosities, mental health, and of course, wherever the dialogue might take us. See you all next time. Goodbye.